we off center ourselves with a wave, and that play button is now somewhere between on our shoulder, and you can see our smile, you can see our eyes staring straight at you, and you get that Giphy image that's going on. So you displace yourself, and this is a great example of where sales leaders say, send that video, but they don't know how to inspect what it is that will get results. And that is one super simple tip that we have in teaching somebody. But guess what? That is a skill that you have to teach sellers.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. Well, that was Mario Martinez Jr., Mario's founder and CEO of Vengreso. And in our conversation today, Mario and I talk about a range of topics. We start by discussing the following conundrum. Why, according to Vengreso's own research, 68% of sellers today believe that the hardest part of selling is prospecting, and yet low win rates would tell us that actually selling or helping the buyer make their decision is actually the hard part of selling. So we're going to dig into that. We're going to also dig into the current state of social selling. And then we're going to spend some time diving into Mario's 4 tips for effective selling via social, including why you need to make sure that you don't think or you don't confuse social selling with social media marketing, and why you should not engage in online or offline sales prospecting until you fix your personal and professional brand. All of this and much, much more. But before we get to Mario, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you subscribe, we'd certainly appreciate if you could also do us the favor of giving us your feedback about how we're doing in the form of a review. So thank you. All right, let's jump into it. Mario, welcome to the show.
Andy, I'm excited to be here with you. Thank you for having me, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, surprisingly, we have never met.
We have not. We are in the same circles, same social space, but we've never actually done anything in person.
Yeah, so I'm glad we're able to do this. Hopefully the first of many. So
Absolutely.
you're based Northern California?
Northern California, born and raised, never left, although I might be leaving soon.
Oh, really?
But yeah. We just my family spent a month in Hawaii. We were supposed to go to supposed to move to Kauai in November of 2020. But then, of course, COVID happened, so we canceled those plans, and then we moved off into Maui and spent a month there looking for a spot. And I think we're pretty settled on taking our leap of faith and moving over to Hawaii.
Oh my God! Okay, we may talk about nothing else but that this entire episode. Just kidding. But so where in Maui? Because we go to Hawaii 2-3 times a year typically, and it's always been sort of a fantasy of mine to move.
Yeah.
Though it's hard because half our kids live in New York, so probably not going to happen, but we'll still go off. And so where in Maui?
So if we did go, it would be over on South Kihei area, Wailea.
Yeah.
That's one area, or Lahaina. So either one, they're total opposite sides of the island. We're not opposite, but
well, yeah, they sure are east and west.
pretty disparate. Distant from each other. But essentially, it would be a great opportunity to be able to get out there. And my wife, actually, she suffers from an autoimmune disorder, and the cold weather is really hard on her in California in the wintertime. And by the way, we don't even have cold weather in comparison.
The relative cold, yeah.
So we definitely couldn't do any of the snowing states, that's for sure. But even the cold climate in California is too cold. And,
wow.
Sometimes in the winter months she ends up in a walker, and sometimes in a wheelchair, because the impact is so great on her. So she's a very young woman, and she unfortunately gets arthritic across the whole body, and sometimes can't even barely walk. So Hawaii, believe it or not, is a neutralization. It neutralizes the issue. So we've figured it out, and we know what works well.
Wow. I mean, I love Maui. I love Kauai. I love Honolulu. Very interesting.
We actually, in November, we had a house. In November 2020, we had a house in Poipu, right across from Poipu Beach.
Yes.
It was a great spot, and but the pandemic, we didn't know what was going on and what to do and what was coming next, and it was going to flare up or not flare up. So we were forced to cancel that. But here we are. We are where we are, and we will make do with what we've got. So
Yeah.
we're excited about the potential
And are
possibility.
you gonna build a house or just buy an existing place?
No, so the goal would be to rent first to make sure that
You're in the right area.
we want to live in that particular
Yeah.
area versus Lahaina versus
Right.
Kaanapali versus any other
Right.
area. And then once we know where we want to be at and what we love and what area, then find something out there. Likely, we'll keep renting out our house here in the East Bay, which we live in the Lafayette Walnut Creek
Mhm.
area. So we'll head on over and
Wow.
keep this property here in case we ever want to come
Yeah.
back.
All right. So Kihei, then you're probably familiar with coconuts.
Of course,
Best fish tacos in the world.
yeah.
Yeah. And then Monkey Pod, now up in Lahaina.
And Wailea,
Yeah.
as
And they
well.
have one in
So,
Wailea
yeah,
too? Okay.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right. So world's best pies. If you like chocolate cream pie or banana cream
Oh,
pie.
oh, you can't beat the hula pie, man. Every night. That's why I came back with an extra 10 pounds. We had hula pie that. Well, good news is we shared one big. It's Hawaiian style size,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Hawaiian
huge.
style size is always big, right? Like they say in Texas, everything's big. So this thing is, about 6-7 inches tall, and it's about 4 inches wide. So the hula pie,
Hula pie,
excuse
yeah.
me, is amazing. We had one almost every single night.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to Duke's up north of Lahaina, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
their hula pie is irresistible. So yeah, we when we go, we try to limit ourselves to twice per visit when we do that.
You might as well splurge. It was COVID. I'd already gained weight anyways,
Yeah,
25 pounds. So
yeah.
keep on going, and then I'll lose it all afterwards.
All right. Well, good luck on that. And yeah, I was going to talk about Hawaii because I saw your pictures, and yeah, it's one of my things that I would look forward to doing is spending a month there, just spend more time. I mean, I've been there probably the longest, I think, consecutively. I was telling somebody yesterday, I think I've been to Hawaii close to 60 times. So we go often. We love it, but never for more than 2 weeks. But I found that when I went for 2 weeks, I definitely did not want to go back at home.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, once you're there, you get very sad over having to leave. But it's oftentimes doesn't feel like reality. However, I did make it a reality for me. I worked actually for 2
sure,
weeks consistently. I got up at 5,
right?
finished up by 3:30. It was great because I could definitely do the morning, and then at 3:30, latest 4 o'clock, I was out at the beach with the boys, and then we did dinner, and then we get to bed, and then I worked. It was perfect. It was a a great shift. I never want to. People always say, "Well, why don't you move to Florida? Why don't you move to South Texas?" And I'm like, I don't want to go forward in time because that means I have to work later hours to support Pacific. I want to go backwards in time so that I can get up earlier and then still have my afternoons in the sun.
Right. And yeah, hopefully I'm not going to offend anybody too much when I say this, but anybody who makes that comment, well, why not Florida, has clearly never been to Hawaii. That's the only thing you can say. Because if you had been to Hawaii, you would never make that comparison. It was South Texas for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just not the same, folks. All right, well,
You got that right.
all right, so for people who aren't familiar with Vengreso, tell us what you guys do. We've had both Vivica, your co-founders, Vivica and Kurt Shaver, on the show.
Yeah. So thanks for asking. So for Vengreso, we are basically a virtual sales or digital sales training and technology company focused squarely on helping sellers and sales leaders to prospect better and sell more, working with clients such as Proofpoint, as an example, Juniper Networks, and even, Andy, the world's largest vanilla extract company.
Okay, there we go.
From industries all across the spectrum, as I mentioned, with the world's largest vanilla extract company, and we actually started 4 years ago by merging together about 7 different companies underneath one umbrella. And I don't recommend it. It's not for the faint of heart, and I would never do that again in that
Right.
fashion. But in fact, it's turned out to be a pretty awesome ride for all of us over the last 4 years. We went from taking all this consolidation of IP and
Hmm.
materials that we had that we were all doing separately in our separate businesses and brought it underneath one umbrella to bring something to the marketplace. And that created now where we've serviced over 1,000 companies that we've worked with for digital sales training programs, whether that be social, whether that be video, really helping the sellers to use an omni-channel approach to
Right.
prospecting and helping them increase sales pipeline.
Well, let's dig into the prospecting part, because reading somewhere in one of your uh, blogs or something that you had done some research, and you're saying that 68% of sellers told you that the hardest thing about selling today was prospecting. And so I have a couple questions about that.
Yeah.
So do we think that's new? I mean, I think that if I went back and took that poll 30 years ago, I would have gotten the same answer.
It's a really great question, and the answer is it's not new. It's the same problem that we've been dealing with for a very, very long time. So actually, we did that one of those polls back in June of 2020, and 58% of sellers said the hardest thing about sales was
Hmm.
prospecting. So we gave them four different options, and one of them was closing the deal. One of them was getting budget from the buyer,
Right.
those types of things, and the other one was getting that first conversation. And fast forward to 9 months later, post pandemic, or I guess during pandemic, April of 2021, and it went
Hopefully,
up
tail
to
end of the pandemic.
what's
Yeah.
that?
Hopefully, the tail end of the pandemic.
Hopefully, the tail end of the pandemic. I
Yes.
guess it depends on the country that you're in, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But hopefully for the U.S., the tail end. But sellers reported that it was 68.5%. So you'll see it's rounded up to 69%. So almost an 11 point jump. And that what I would say is it's never become more talked about now than it was in the past. And I think that's the difference, right? In the past, we were using different channels. We'd use email, we use phone, and we saw that these channels were effective in being able to use them. But what we figured out as a sales leadership team is, and again, if you look at Merrill Lynch as a great example, Merrill Lynch has 6 years worth of data that they collected that their brokers had been using the cold call to be able to try to connect with prospects. Well, in the
Yeah.
pandemic, it came to a screeching halt. Why? Because everybody else is using the phone, everybody else is using email. Email went up between February of 2020 and 2021 by 40.8 billion more emails. 40.8 billion more emails. And our meeting ratio went up by over 140% on a per person basis, and that's published by Microsoft. So if you think about that, these channels that used to be extremely effective or more effective than what they are now are extremely much less effective now. And I think that's one of the challenges is what you said. You pointed out something that said, hey, wouldn't sellers say that this was one of the hardest things 5 years ago? Yes. 10 years ago? Yes. That's always been the hard thing. But now it's even harder as a result of using channels that frankly are not getting the same level sets of responses.
Yeah. I mean, interesting. Unfortunately, we didn't track data back 30 years ago about stuff like this, because I'm curious about that. Because I mean, so here's one of the things is this sort of one of my, I don't know, pet peeves, you might say, or whatever, is that if you look at the sales literature that's out there online, and yeah, you and I both are contributors to that,
Yep.
either good or bad. But in general, I would say that roughly 2/3 to 3/4 of the content that's published about sales is about top of funnel activity. And I've done this is purely me going through and looking at things, right, and just sort of estimating, but a disproportionate amount compared to where the action really happens, which is it's great to have a prospect, but if we can't convert the prospect to a customer, we don't have a business. And I was wondering why we seem to be so focused on that. Because, I mean, you could take one look at the business and say, okay, well, in the SaaS business, a lot of these companies operate on sort of a win rate. It's sort of like 20% roughly. and it's, industry standard is not much different than that.
Right.
Now, to me, that would argue that the problem is not shortage of prospects. It's the inability to sell once we have a prospect. So I'm just curious, because this is your business, you're in this. Why do we seem so fixated, disproportionately fixated on top of funnel? Again, we have to do it, but I'm just wondering whether we're all buying into a narrative that maybe is the wrong narrative.
So that's interesting you say that. So let me give you a different perspective.
Yeah,
and that
please.
is if you look at the top 25 sales training companies, if you look at the 200 sales training companies that are out there, 90% of them only focus on from a rep saying hello to the close. 90% of their training efforts.
Mm-hmm.
There are very few companies and sales training companies that are focusing on that, what we call pre-hello, right? All that prospecting efforts that happen here. And that's where Vengreso, frankly, fits in, and why so many of the training companies like Miller Hyman and Challenger and Sandler and Corporate Visions and Rain Group and all those other well-known sales training companies, why we actually partner with all of them, because we don't compete and they don't have anything in relation to prospecting. Now, albeit, I would argue and support your statement that I believe once you have a hello, the hardest thing about is getting those things to close. And if we can increase our close percentage rates from 20% to say 30%, we can increase our bottom line or our top line revenue, right? Without a doubt. So that is very important. And that's why so many training companies are focused in on that particular aspect. I think, however, one of the challenges that we are seeing, while everybody's talking about top of funnel type of activities, most of that content that's out there is pretty much crap.
Well, yeah.
And here's what
I didn't say that, but yes.
yeah, I'll say it, because it's some content writer that is in a marketing organization that is basically trying to write for SEO purposes, and it really brings no value-added content. For example, if you look at our definitive guide to prospecting and compare that to the other top 10 articles that appear on page 1, hands down, our article is relevant, provides context, gives a plan, tells customers what they should do and how they should do it based upon research and data, whereas all the other ones are just doing it from a Google SEO perspective, right? And so that is the difference, where I think we've taken it from a pure prospecting standpoint. First off, there's content out there, but most of it, I think, is not that great. And more importantly, we bring it from a perspective of, here's what we focus on and only what we focus on. And the challenge is this, Andy, it's not so much that this is a new problem. No, this has been an age-old problem that we've had for a long time. It's not so much that we're fixated on the top of the funnel process, because frankly, the rule of thumb is more conversations equals more pipeline, and then better closing skills equals close won deals, right?
And we're missing the last bit, but yeah, go ahead.
Yep, we're all focused on this area right here. The problem that happens is that most VPs of sales are our age and older, 45 and older, right? And we were never trained to prospect in the digital era.
Correct.
Example, if you receive a video message from a salesperson, how do you know what's a good video message? How do you know how much time that sales rep should or has to be able to capture your attention, that you can then coach your sellers to, hey, by the way, you've got 7 to 15 seconds to capture that person's attention when they've clicked on your video. Okay, well, let's rewind backwards now. Well, how do you get them to click? Well, what's the science when your sellers are sending out an email? What is the number one trick to get someone to open up the email? Ask any sales leader 45 and older, and they're going to say, they don't know, because we didn't prospect that way. And so we are severely disadvantaged at the 45 and older, at that VP level and above, because we frankly have a perspective, but that perspective is not based upon data, and it's not based upon experience. And we hear this all the time. Hey, well, if you can't get them on the phone, right, and you've tried cold calling them, and they're not responding to your email, go connect with them on LinkedIn. Go see if you can get them on LinkedIn. Send them a video. Great. Well, what should you do to be able to get that connection? What should that video include so that you actually bring value to that particular conversation? And that's one of the big problems that we're seeing.
So give us some hints of solutions then.
Well, let's go rewind back to the use of a video.
Sure.
I don't know if you've ever seen this, and let's use hopefully you've seen this and you've been, quote, prospected to by sellers.
Oh, yeah. Constantly.
All the time, yeah? All right. Have you ever received a video message from a seller?
Yes.
Okay. On that video message, did you ever see this? Now, for those of you listening and you can't see what I'm about to do here to Andy, so I'll narrate what I'm about to do audibly so you can hear this. But did you ever see this big old giant play button in front of someone's face?
Yeah. I'm sorry. You're holding your fist up, but yeah.
I'm holding my fist up right in front of my face so that Andy can see me visually. And what can't you see when my fist, which is the play button on the actual thumbnail, right? What can't you see, Andy, when this play button is sitting right in front of my face?
Your face, your expression, yes.
You can't see smile.
Right.
You can't see eyes. So the first thing that we do when we see a video, first off, we all know that top 5 marketing tactics for marketers includes the use of video. So video is powerful. Video is amazing. 59% of executives report that they watch one business-related video at least per week. Also, we know that video can do something for a engagement, which is it's the visual piece. I now can see that individual, but what am I looking at? In milliseconds, what do humans do when they see someone?
Oh, they make a judgment. Absolutely.
They make a judgment. And that judgment is either I'm going to trust this individual or I'm not going to trust this individual inherently.
Yeah.
And now we don't know if we can fully trust, but we make that judgment of, is it safe to click or is it not safe to click?
Yeah, I'd go that far. Right. Yeah, the science is called precognitive processing, and we all do it. 250.
Exactly. And if we have that play button, I'm sorry, Andy, go ahead. What'd you say?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about that in my second book. You have 250 milliseconds is the amount of time that we take to form that perception. We're not even aware we're doing it.
Exactly right.
Precognitive. We just do it. Yes.
Exactly right. And if that play button is sitting on top of your eyes and your smile and your mouth, you've lost that opportunity to be able to pull that particular buyer into the video. Another example, and this came from data from...
A question on that one, though. So just get very practical on this, though, is for all the tools that are out there that people might use to create a video message, can they control the placement of the play button?
No, except for one. Actually, BombBomb actually controls the placement and puts that play button at the bottom of the screen, whereas all the other ones have that play button sitting right here in the front of your face as the general rule of thumb. And so, no, you can't control it, but you can control the thumbnail. And that's what we do in our training. When we're training on the skill of sending a video, whether you're using Loom, OneMob, Videolicious, Hippo Video, Vidyard, doesn't matter. Any of those tools and technologies, it's no longer where this play button's here. Guess what we teach our sellers how to do? We off-center ourselves with a wave.
Right.
And that play button is now somewhere between on our shoulder, and you can see our smile, you can see our eyes staring straight at you, and you get that Giphy image that's going on.
Right.
So you displace yourself, and this is a great example of where sales leaders say, send that video, but they don't know how to inspect what it is that will get results. And that is one super simple tip that we have in teaching somebody. But guess what? That is a skill that you have to teach sellers. Kind of like, remember the old days, Andy, when we were cold calling?
Yes, unfortunately, yes.
When we were cold calling, we had a Y connector. We sat in someone's cube, we listened to their calls, we would listen to what was good, what was bad, and then they'd put us on the phone, and our sales manager would sit next to us, and they would listen to what we did well, what we didn't do well, and they would coach us along the way, right?
Yep.
So we're now cold prospecting using a different medium: video, social, text, direct mail. And we as leaders have not trained our sellers We've not plugged in that Y connector to be able to coach them on what's good and what's bad because we simply don't know.
Mhm.
And that's why we exist, right? That's one example.
Yeah, and well, and then new technologies like Ring DNA's Yoda AI, which is real time sort of guidance for the seller in the midst of the call, which is the next step beyond that. Then is because you can set that up ahead of time to queue on certain keywords and so on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And so by the way, that Y connector is now a virtual Y connector, like the Ring DNA
Yeah.
solution, right? Or
Yeah.
Whisper from some of the other players that are out there in the marketplace, right? There are all kinds of really other great solutions to virtualize this for the call, but we're focused on the call. What we need to realize is there are I have customers today. We just worked with a large Fortune 100 for a 2,000 person global sales deployment of our prospecting training, which just signed actually in the month of May.
Well, congratulations.
And thank you. And if I were to message the CSO on email, inevitably, I always receive a one-word answer back. But if I message him through text or through social, guess what? We're having a nice little conversation.
Right.
On the flip side, I have another buyer, which is Proofpoint, one of the largest cybersecurity companies in the world. And I have a buyer there that if I email, I will never get a response back. But if I text between 5:30 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. his time, guess what? I'm getting a response back, right? So some customers will not engage on one channel, yet they will engage on another channel because that's what they like, that's what they're comfortable with, and that's what's made our job much more difficult, not only in pandemic, but even post-pandemic and certainly pre-pandemic, is the buyer changed the game. There's all kinds of mediums now that we as sales leaders have to understand, hey, I was trained on how to cold call. Why are we not training our sellers on how to use video, how to use social, how to use email correctly, how to get conversions on those emails to get people to click open my actual email?
Yeah, but I would extend your point though and say that beyond lead gen activity that you're using these tools for, the same thing applies to any communication interaction you have with buyers. Is the range of channels that you can use and should use depends on the buyer and their preference, and you have to be alert and aware of what those are. And I said that imperative exists throughout the entire channel. I mean, I just look at myself with my LinkedIn inbox is I spend more time on that than my email inbox.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, and that's just the way that it's easier to communicate with people. I like messaging as opposed to the informality of messaging as opposed to when I have to write an email, I tend to get more formal about it. And I mean, you have to adapt to where your customers are, the way they want to communicate.
Yeah, well, we call it long live the omni-channel approach to selling, right? And that is not going away. And that's why it's important is, we have, if you look at all the sales technology providers out there, I think there's a little over 1,100 sales tech providers, right? And rewind a couple of years ago, there were 700. Now we've got 1,100 providers that are out there. And if you look at it, a big portion of them are focused on this prospecting element, right?
Oh yeah.
But here's something to keep in mind: a fool with the tool
still a fool.
Is still a fool.
Yeah, that's right.
So that is what we have to we have to reshape the way we're thinking things. And sales leaders, we wake up every day thinking about several things. One, I need my sellers having more sales conversations. Two, we need to grow the sales pipeline. And three, we need to be able to close out what we've got in the pipeline. Right? We can't afford to be able to have these misses.
Yeah, and the point I made earlier is I think we're not paying enough attention to the last bit. And win rates show that, I believe, and they don't need to. And one of the effects is that of low win rates is you end up burning through big chunks of your market with really bad interactions, and you can't revisit those oftentimes very quickly. So to me, it seems just a little bit out of whack in terms of the amount of effort and attention paid to it. But to your point, it is complex. It's more complex than it ever has been. And people aren't appropriately trained. And I think that's sort of true throughout the entire sales process, regardless, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's the big thing that low win rates points out, is that we're just not executing discovery, needs analysis, qualification, all the things that seem very fundamental. Something is this connection with the way we've been doing it, with the way buyers are buying, is fundamentally broken. And
Absolutely.
yeah, definitely needs to be a different perspective. I think it's more about perspective, I think, than anything else, in terms of understanding what we're trying to accomplish with the buyers.
Yeah. What would be really nice is if buyers, if they had some sort of flag out or some sort of a message board that said, "Here are my 3 priorities for the quarter. Only contact me if you can solve one of these 3 priorities, but don't contact me if you can't," right? Because we waste so much time as sellers trying to reach out to buyers who don't necessarily have a problem
Right.
that they are interested in solving at that point in time. And that's the hard part is, especially on the outbound prospecting. Inbound is a little differently because someone's proactively potentially raised their hand
Sure.
and said, "Hey, I have this problem." But
Right.
on the outbound, you're basically shooting in the dark and you have no idea whether or not, if I call up Andy Paul today, whether or not Andy has got this particular problem that I solve for my particular product or solution. And if they don't have that problem, or they're not paying attention to that particular problem at this point in time, or maybe they're not aware of that problem, then likely you're not going to be moving that deal forward anytime soon.
Well, I think that's one of the fundamental disconnects, right? Is that um, as sellers, we pitch before we understand the buyer, right? It's fundamental sales motion, and
Yeah.
that's problematic and increasingly problematic for buyers, I believe. And I think that that one of the perspectives that needs to change is this. Well, let's take a step back. Is because I talk about this a lot. Is buyers generally resist salesy behavior, right? I like to say, as the buyer will never ask you to be more salesy, right? Hey, Mario, I like your product. You guys just aren't salesy enough. Could you be more salesy?
Right.
They're never going to say that. But that's sort of the default way that we train sellers. I don't believe that being salesy is innate human behavior. I think it's learned behavior. And so don't we have the imperative as a profession and training and coaching and so on to say, yeah, there's a different way we need to teach our people how to behave and act that aligns with what buyers will accept. And if we don't think that that has an impact on what really is very low productivity, in my estimation, in sellers, and it comes measured by win rates and so on, it absolutely does.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that's why one of the reasons why I've called on IT leaders, I've called on HR leaders, I've called on marketing leaders, and sales leaders, and my favorite buyer to call on is a sales leader. Because we're going to cut to the chase. You're always generally not going to be rude and cut somebody off, especially if they get you on the phone, right? We might ignore the email, but we know when someone's coming to us for a reason, and we're gonna be like, either I have that problem or I don't have that problem, and it's pretty easy to be able to weed out what you want to be talking to, what you don't want to be talking to. That's one of the reasons why I love talking to sales leaders.
Yeah, well, I wonder whether you have the same impulse that I do, which I have to resist all the time, which is to coach people when they approach me.
It's a malediction. It's my curse. I can't not take the cold call, and I can't not help myself. We're a training company. I can't not help myself telling them, if you had done this, it would have been, but you wouldn't have got the sale.
Yeah, I mean, I receive, we have 150 episodes a year of this podcast. I receive roughly 1,000 pitches per year to be on the show. And yeah, just the things that people do, which I'm sure they're doing when they're pitching customers, right? That's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could spend my entire day trying to help people with that. But to your point, I don't have that time. But
do you ever accept? I don't know. As a total side note, I get them too because we have the Modern Selling podcast, right? And I get the pitches. Usually, it's from the PR companies or the podcast booking companies. That's what I love. There's even a name for it now.
There is the name for it.
Do you? I could think of maybe out of the last probably 300, I said yes to two, total of two. I can think of only two people I said yes to, and that was because number one, I knew both of those individuals,
Right.
and number two, I had intended at having those CEOs from those sales technology companies on my podcast, anyways. So that's the only reason why I accepted those two things. I'm just curious. Did you ever accept them?
I do, because part of my mission is that I think that we need new voices in sales,
Okay, fair
and
enough.
we don't have enough new voices in sales. And so, if I hear of somebody interesting, but to caveat that, if it's not an email or a pitch that was sent to me personally, right? If I can tell most of the time, right? We're not all 100% perfect on this. If it's, hey, this is a part of a cadence they're sending out to potential podcast hosts, those I reject right away.
Right.
But I'm looking for somebody that has something interesting to say, and we do a lot of episodes, so we're trying to change the conversation around sales. So I look at them. Most of them are rejected, obviously, because we had 6 for every one or 8 for every one that we do. But it has to be good. And I've had individual salespeople that have been on the show, that are going to be on the show, that sent me a note that was like, of course I'll have you on. That was a great pitch. I mean, it's like, sure, love it. If they do a great job, I'm going to probably have them on the show.
Nice.
Yeah, because they've shown a voice, and that's what we want.
Fabulous. Well, most of mine are usually the book author who's who's written a bazillion 1,000 books and has all kinds of different following, and it's just like that's not, I'm B2B sales, like that's not that's not even the right target.
Right, but Mario, I am going to pitch you next year when my book comes out, so just FYI, putting on.
You don't need to pitch. You don't need to pitch me, Andy. You get an automatic invitation to join the Modern Selling Podcast.
Thank you. I look forward to that. Well, hey, I wanted to go through something real quickly that it doesn't get talked about as much. That maybe the terminology's changed around in terms of social selling, because you guys have deep expertise in this, and it's funny that social selling sort of had its moment, and there are a bunch of people that sort of push back against this notion of social selling, but the fact is that whatever you want to call the motion, it's become more important than ever. I mean, LinkedIn has become more important than ever. If you're not paying attention there, then you're not giving yourself the full advantage of the platform. So you published something about 4 social selling tips I thought was really interesting. I just wanted to run through those. Do you recall that article?
I do know that article. Okay. Was that the one with the toilet scene?
I don't remember.
Okay, all right, the picture. I think I know which article you're talking about.
All right, so tip 1 was, as a salesperson, whatever you do not engage in online or offline sales prospecting until you fix your personal and professional brand. So let's talk about that, because this whole idea of personal and professional branding certainly has come to the fore over the last year and a half.
Right. So here's the rationale behind the professional branding component. First off, if you're going to leverage a social medium and engage with a potential buyer, the probability of them clicking on your profile and looking back at you is extremely high. In fact, LinkedIn ran a state of buyer, the state of today's buyer report at the end of last year, and they reported that 72% of buyers who are engaged by a seller, whether it's through call or whether it's through email or LinkedIn, will actually look back at a seller's profile.
Right.
What are they looking for? They are looking for, who is this person all about?
Mm-hmm.
What do they do? How do they help? Who do they help? And in most cases, our sellers' profiles speak to quota-crushing sales rep, best contract negotiator, all-time President's Club earner, right? Yeah. And the best at whatever it is. What? So if you think about this from this perspective, we are having our sellers go out there and engage through social channels And their buyers are looking back at their profile, and what they see is a resume,
Mm-hmm.
not a resource.
Right.
And that's the issue with don't go out there and tell your folks to go leverage LinkedIn until you fix the branding problem. And the branding problem is you got to have the messaging that speaks to who you help, how you help, and what business problem you solve. Ensure you've got the right media on there. And think of it this way. Let's just say you've got 100 sellers or 10 sellers or 10,000 sellers. Doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
You may not realize this as a sales leader that is listening in or a marketing leader that's listening in. But did you know that you could theoretically create 10 or 10,000 minicompanyabc.com micro websites? Keyword optimized,
Right.
with multimedia, content, messaging. And now when your seller goes and engage through social, that buyer is going to look back and they're going to make an assessment. Do I have the problem that this seller is speaking to? The other thing that we want to be thinking about too is a picture says 1,000 words.
Right.
We've known this for eons worth of time. But do you know how many sellers and sales leaders have pictures that is them at the wedding, them with the arm over the shoulder, or worse yet, Andy,
glamour shot.
Yeah, worse yet, they don't have the setting turned on so that when a buyer comes to their profile and they're a second degree connection or third, they can't see the seller's picture. And these are the types of things that are so basic and fundamental to,
Right.
Would you ever show up, Andy? Let's use a real life example. Let's just say we're going to go attend a networking event, as we've always done.
Right.
You go to a networking event and you walk in with a bag
Over your
on
head.
your head.
Yeah.
Would you ever do that?
No, I don't. I mean, do you accept connection requests from people that don't have a photo?
No, and that there you go. So
Right.
so here's the thing. We don't even think about this digital calling card that is out there, this digital website, and CMOs have we talk to companies that go through rebranding all the time. And one of the last things is oh my God, why didn't we think of rebranding our 1,000 sellers that we've got or our 10 sellers, whatever?
Mhm.
It doesn't matter what it is. We never thought about that. Hello. And
Right.
also sales leader, this is not a marketing problem. This is a sales problem. Let me give you an
Absolutely.
example. When your salesperson comes on board, do you give them the auto signature that they should have? A nice standard template that they should have on there so they can, represent with maybe a CTA, a banner or something like that? Well, what's the difference between the banner and the auto signature on the email that you give them or
the
the
profile.
voicemail script that you give them?
Mm-hmm.
Versus the script or the template that you give them so that when someone comes to their digital calling card, their profile, that it speaks to, again, who you help, how you help them, what business problem you solve.
Yeah.
That is why we say do not, under any circumstances, tell your rep, if you're listening, to go out there and engage without fixing your brand first.
100%.
Make sure you map to the buyer's journey. That's the issue.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, you got me all sparked up.
Well, yeah, and unfortunately, we're running out of time. We're going to have you back and talk about this because this is something I'm very passionate about as well. And yeah, you said 72%. I know Rain Group did a study. It's 82% of buyers look at a profile before they talk to a seller. It's huge, right? And
Yeah.
I want to have you back. We'll talk about the next sort of level too. Is just about this whole idea of, I think sellers as part of their brand need to have a point of view about what they do. And this is still, unfortunately, in many quarters, controversial that we don't want reps, quote unquote, creating content. I don't think you avoid it these days if you're a seller and you want to succeed. But we'll have you back and we'll talk about that. In the meantime, if people want to read the rest of this article, go to vengreso.com and check it out, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. 4 tips to social selling or the definitive guide to prospecting. So either one. And thank you for having me on the show too, Andy. I
Mario,
appreciate
my
it.
pleasure. And yeah, we'll definitely do it again because we're just getting started on this. What I actually prepared most of the questions to ask you about. So, as oftentimes happens on this show, we'll have you back. It'll be a good reason to do it. So, if people want to connect with you, LinkedIn, right?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Make sure you say you heard me on Andy's podcast here. And so I know, please personalize connection requests so I know how we are connected.
Excellent. All right, Mario, thank you so much.
Andy, thank you, buddy.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm so grateful for your support of this show. And I want to thank my guest, Mario Martinez Jr., for sharing his insights with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can do all that on your phone in less than a minute as soon as this episode is over. So thank you for your help. And as always, thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.